Hello. Okay. Hi, I'm Amy Wolff. On behalf of myself and co-producers Matthew Young and Marcel Saba, neither of which are here, unfortunately, we'd like to present you to, or invite you to Inspired Live at Photoville. The presenters tonight have all been encouraged to talk about their work, but also their sources of inspiration. We make time to produce Inspired Live events because we feel it's important to remember as creatives like why we do what we do, and hopefully you'll walk out of here with ideas you didn't have before. This is a fast-paced program where each artist speaks one at a time while images are shown simultaneously. No two presentations have ever been the same, and you can see from our long list of presenters that's kind of amazing. If you're local, or if you'll be in New York at the end of October, we have another event at SVA on October 22nd. We haven't announced presenters yet, but we do have a mailing list on our very DIY website, but there is a mailing list, sign up there. I'm excited about all of our presenters tonight, all of whom are participating Photoville artists. Thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, Patricia, aka Grandma Techno, and Matthew Callahan were unable to make it due to the storm, so our thoughts are with them and everyone in that part of our country. This is our second time at Photoville. We're happy they invited us back. Thank you to the Photoville staff, especially Jordan. That was me last year, and it's a difficult job. Volunteers, Photoville partners, and co-founders, Dave, who's also one of our presenters, and Laura and Sam. Thank you guys for coming, and if we're ready, our first presenter.
It should be, yeah.
Hello? It's on? Hello? No, it's not. Is it on? Is it on? Okay. So hi, my name is Griselda San Martin. I'm, oh, okay. Can you stop this for a second? Do I have a few seconds to, okay. So my name is Griselda San Martin. I'm from Spain, and I'm a documentary photographer focusing on immigration issues. I decided to show, I was told to choose 15 images to talk about inspiration, and I decided to not show any of my work. I have a container here, so if you want to see my work, you are welcome to come to my container. I'm just going to show you images of photographers that I admire and that have inspired me, and yes, that. But I have my notes here because the first thing I did, it was choosing the images, and I sent them to Amy. And then when I started writing down why those images inspired me, I realized that I could talk for 30, 40, and 1 hour about each photo. So I just made some notes in case also, English is not my first language, and when, I don't know, I mean, in these situations, maybe it's good to have my notes. That's why I need my both hands, and I need to have them. Okay. So before you hit the, I need to look at my notes and also be aware of the photos changing, so it's challenging. So sorry if I... Okay. So the first image I chose is from a Mexican photographer, Graciela Iturbide, who has inspired me in so many ways, and it's difficult to say in 20 seconds, but mostly is because of the way she approaches her projects, and it's because she's not simply an observer. She is part of the community that she photographs, and that is something that that's the way I work in my... This one is from Alex Webb, and the thing that I take from this photo or from his work is the color. Graciela photographs black and white. Alex Webb uses color because he says that it's an emotional photographic response to the places he photographs, like Mexico. This one is from Alex South, and this project, which is called Sleeping by the Mississippi, I am obsessed with it, and the way that he's allowed into the intimacy of the people that he photographs, and the way he transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. This one is by the great Robert Frank, and I think this book is, well, like everyone else, is one of the most influential photography projects. And this I discovered in a video art class that I took in college, and I was blown away by. This is my favorite movie of all times, and is like the best. But basically, what's very interesting is the use of light in terms of photography. And the interesting thing is that Kubrick used lenses used by NASA for the Apollo moon landings, so he could convey this. And this is Gregory Crutzen following on the cinematic aspect of photography, and I really like his work, so I'm showing it to you. And the next one is Alessandra Saliman. Wait. But anyway, she photographed her children, and it was a lot of controversy. Many people said that she was almost being pornographic, but I think it's one of the most beautiful explorations of childhood. And following on the concept of childhood and transition into young adulthood, Alessandra photographed these two cousins for many years, and I think it's a beautiful project. If you haven't looked at it, it's beautiful. This one is Rineke Dijkstra, a Dutch photographer who photographs people in states of transition, and this is one of my favorite portrait photographers. And yes, she focused on children and adolescents because she says that they have no defined image of themselves yet. So she tries to capture this, and I think this one impossible to talk about in 20 seconds. Her name is Yokomiso. The interesting thing about this project is that she never met the subjects. She sent letters to them saying, if you want to be photographed by me, go to your window and I'll take a photo of you at this specific time. This one amazing artist, Sophie Calle, French, a boyfriend broke up with her through an email, and she asked 100 women to react to that email, and she photographed and did installations of the work. This guy is also amazing, went to Afghanistan, and instead of taking images of suffering and pain, they just bring this photographic paper and just exposed it for 20 seconds, and this is what they got. So it's a different way of talking about war. And this is from Barcelona, my city, Joan Fontcuberta, and I love everything he does. His projects are crazy. Again, 20 seconds, not enough to talk, but he created this character, which is himself, that's himself. So he experiments with reality and truth. This is a good friend of mine, Veronica Cárdenas. She will be here next weekend. She asked immigrants or people who were thinking about crossing the border to wear the face of the most powerful man on earth, being them the most vulnerable people. And of course, I have to end with this image because if there's something that I think inspires me is when I see that someone can create change or change in policies. Or so John Moore, he has an amazing container in Photoville, and he's a. Thank you. Thank you. And up next is Nate.
I don't know who that was, but thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Nate Larson. I'm one half of the Larson Schindelman team. We have a fence over here by this entrance to Photoville, so you should go check that out. In the slides, I pulled some of our stuff to give you a sense of what we do, and then I also pulled some influences, people that we talk about in relation to our own practice. So I'm good if you are. All right, so in a nutshell, we look at where people tweet from and we photograph those sites. The project is a lot about digital privacy, and it's also thinking about what people self-disclose and how these systems of big data are watching us every day. Our preferred way of doing the project is to do it as a site-specific commission. So this is one we did for the Walter Marks Center for the Arts in Southern California. And this is another one that we did for Third Space Gallery, which is in St. John, New Brunswick. And with the project, we started photographing in our home areas. I live in Baltimore, Marnie lives in Atlanta, so we did a lot of work in those two cities. And then as we've gotten more attention with the project, our preferred way is to partner and go to a city. So for example, this summer, we have a solo show opening with the George Eastman Museum in January, and we were there this summer for a month in Rochester looking at specifically tweets that had social justice hashtags attached to it. And then that'll be the basis for the body of work. What we love about that is that people that live in the community can recognize those places and start to put together that meta layer of digital data with their day-to-day life. So this is the work that we have in Photoville, so you can go check this out on the fence, and hopefully the type is a little bit more readable in fence form than it is on the screen. But 2 years ago, we went to St. Petersburg to do an artist residency. And the top trending Cyrillic hashtag at the time was "Thanks to Putin for this," which is both sincere and sarcastic, depending who uses it. So we spent some time photographing around St. Petersburg and also in Moscow. And we're working with a translator named Yaroslav Volovod, who is incredible. He was a young curatorial studies grad student at the Bard University there. And then when we got back to the US, we continued that by looking at the "Thanks Obama" hashtags in the sister cities of St. Petersburg and Moscow, which are Chicago and Los Angeles. So we've been continuing the project there, and hopefully it'll be our second book. The first set of images were from our first book, and then this will hopefully be our second book, which is 2 hashtags, 2 countries, 4 cities, and looking at it in a much more tighter, contained way. And of course, the unspoken presence is this administration over the whole thing, which really broke onto the political scene through Twitter. So there's something about Russian hacking and Donald Trump embedded somewhere within the project. So in terms of influences, we talk a lot about Joel Sternfeld. This is his On the Site book, which I'm sure many of you know. But he's documenting events after the fact by going to that location. So when we're photographing our tweets, we're never there at the same time as the Twitter user. We never meet them. Instead, it's an exploration of how this stuff is like a trace, or we always talk about it as sort of a historic plaque, that a battle happened here. We're also friends with and deeply influenced by Mark Klett and Byron Wolff, his primary collaborator. This is from their Third View project, where they're looking at Timothy O'Sullivan photographs 100 years after the fact, and then 20 years after that. So returning to that same site. Mark and Byron talk about the idea of deep time, and we like that concept a lot, that you can take a moment and compress it. So Mark Rudell here is looking at the sites of railroad embankments. So like this was originally carved for the railroad, and as you can see, the railroad is not there any longer. And this is from his book, Westward, The Course of Empire, as you can see in the caption. We're also deeply influenced by Hassan Elahi, who takes the burden off of government surveillance by surveilling himself. He was detained by the FBI and then later INS under suspicion of terrorism. Newsflash, he's not a terrorist, but they wouldn't clear him, so this is what he does now, is he just sends these vast troves of digital data to them every day. Or we also look at Jill Majid, who's here in New York, but she did this project for the Liverpool Biennial, where she partnered with the guy that watches the surveillance cameras and then designed a series of performances for the benefit of him through the perspective of the surveillance cameras. And we love that sort of interactive way of subverting a power structure. Trevor Paglin, if you find yourself in DC, has an amazing show up at the American Art Museum there. This is from his The Other Night Sky project, where he's developed a method of tracking and photographing the satellites that are not officially, they don't officially exist. So he works with a computer-guided telescope mount. Or we also talk about what we do as sort of being a platform or a conduit for the Twitter user. So Emily Jasier does this sort of wish fulfillment where she travels with her American passport where people with Palestinian passports can't go and performs these actions on their behalf. Or this last artist is Liza Nguyen, who published this book, My Father, when her father passed away, and she documents his life through the places he lived and worked, through the objects he left behind, and then through written testimonials about him from his friends. And we love that sort of idea of triangulating in, on a person, through these other ways of knowing them. And we think about our work as sort of, circling, the idea and sort of triangulating. So that's our stuff. My friend Liz is passing around some postcards, or maybe already has, so if you want to check out what we do, we have a website, we have an Instagram, and you should do that. And also see the fence. And up next is Sebastián.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sebastián Hidalgo. I'm a visual journalist based out of Chicago. I did something a little differently. I wrote a speech, and I hope I can get it within the time frame, so I'll try my best. And, well, before we start, the images that you're going to see on the screen are a collection of images that I've done for over the span of 5 years in inner or black and brown communities of Chicago. So I hope you can get a kind of theme about what I do and the images and Chicago based on what you see. So I remember the day my grandfather's passing. Every day I'm reminded by the impact he had on my life, the lesson that I shared, or I try to strive to share through others through my work. When I wake up in the morning with a job to do, I think about the struggle my grandfather faced providing for his family. I think about the person that he was, a father, caregiver, boxer, a wise man beyond his years. My grandfather was a person who wouldn't hesitate to give the shirt off his back if he saw that somebody needed it, whom at the age of 16 built a home in Mexico, Nuevo Leon, where he would raise his children and teach them to live a life full of compassion and empathy. It would be a year in one of these rooms that he built. I would hear a little bell ring from his room whenever he needed support. At the age of 12, it was upon my mother, my grandmother, and I to accommodate him as he struggled. His body was fragile, incredibly skinny. It made it difficult for him to even perform the simplest of acts, such as drinking water from a cup. We would pass the time recounting memories of him walking a horse around the block before any of his grandchildren got a chance to ride it, or the time he first gave me my first beer, or when we gossiped about how the family pet fell in love with a dog, or a duck, or a goat. One night in March of 2008, I remember dreaming of falling teeth and bleeding gums. And I woke up to my mother sharing the news we as a family had anticipated for over a year. I rushed into the bedroom to see my aunts and uncles huddled around him as he struggled to breathe. And in his last moments, I remember him mustering every little bit of courage and strength he had to lean forward and blow 7 goodbye kisses with silent jaw movements, which he dedicated to his wife and children. And it was a beautiful moment that I knew represented him for the person that he was. But I quickly realized that I was the only grandchild in the room. So I took a step back and adopted the role of the observer in the service of my absent family members who couldn't be there. More than anything, I wanted to share those 7 goodbye kisses to the family who couldn't be there or to see him. So I considered this moment in particular to be my introduction to photography. It changed my life, and it would be the next day my uncle would hand me a camera and told me to document everything and fill it up. So that's what I did. I documented the food we cooked, the animals that we gave thanks to my aunts and uncles floating around his house, mourning to my mother's stoic posture. During his funeral, there was a crowd of people that would go and give him thanks for providing them food when they had nobody else in this small town. And my grandmother was being held back by my oldest brother as the keepers roped them down to lay him to rest. And I take these lessons as a photojournalist, visual journalist, or concerned photographer, or just a photographer. And it can be difficult to do nothing in the face of circumstances. In my home in Pilsen in Chicago, which you probably saw up there, I would find myself sheltering behind a car, wall or sidewalk when there was a drive-by shooting. And I knew that I couldn't just do anything in those moments, so I reached down to my camera to provide my only contribution to those types of events in hopes that people who don't have to live with those circumstances every day could at least understand that it happens. And there's no separation between my life and my work. Every day it's one self-sustaining circle. They support one another where I can grow with my work and my work can grow with me. And photojournalism allows me to do that. It allows me to care for people just like my grandfather did with his contributions. To learn about the world as much as I want to learn about myself. And this is the reason why I carry my camera, as a reminder of who my grandfather was and the lesson that he taught me through life and death. And that's what inspires me.
Oh, wow. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laylah Barrayn. I am a documentary photographer, photojournalist. I'm from Brownsville, Brooklyn. I still live here. And I live between here and Dakar, Senegal. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about everything. There's some photos from my Instagram account. There's some random stuff, but they all are inspiring to me as a photographer. All right. So first picture is of my mother, Cynthia. She passed away actually in December. She was very sick and she was on life support. And one day I decided that, she needs to be released into the world. So my mother actually inspired me to be a photographer. She always picked up the camera and documented the family. And for that, we have an expansive archive of a lot of our family members that actually passed away. That's myself and my best friend Delphine Fawundu. We have a container here in Photoville, and last year we self-published a book on women photographers of the African diaspora. It featured 118 women photographers from the African continent and the diaspora, and we were working on that book for 10 years, and we were proud of that. I'm very much inspired by Thomas Sankara. He worked for the liberation of Burkina Faso, and he was also very much a advocate for women's empowerment and always strived to have women included in the fight and the movement for independence in Burkina Faso. That's a picture of Luis Mendez. He's here. You've probably seen him. He's the hardest working photographer, the most photographed photographer. So I'm always inspired by him because, he gets up every day and he does his thing 7 days a week. He's on the street, he's photographing, he's mentoring people and teaching them about analog photography. That's me at the Soul of a Nation exhibition in Arkansas. It's here in Brooklyn right now. And the picture I'm standing in front of is was painted by Barclay Hendricks, and his entire collection of paintings are extremely beautiful, empowering portraiture and images of black women and black people in the diaspora. This is a collection of photographs by a Senegalese photographer. His name is Umar Lee. He died 2 years ago, and I went to his studio in northern Senegal and collected some of his prints from his son, and I plan to do an entire exhibition inspired by some of his work. This is a colonial photograph by Pierre Taché. I'm not so much inspired by this photograph, but I'm inspired by encouraging black and brown people to author their own photographs, because with colonial photographs, as you know, the people in the photographs weren't so much willing participants in making that photograph. This is Ruby Washington. She was the first black woman photographer on staff at the New York Times. Unfortunately, she passed away this week, and we are honoring her at our container number 44, and I'm very much inspired by her work as well. And thanks for David Gonzalez and Jim Estra for sending me this photograph. This is my friend Evelyn Coley. I spent some time in southern Senegal. There was a conflict there for about 20 years. And her family, a lot of her family were killed actually by the rebel forces. So she's one of the last surviving members. And she's here with her daughter in Casamance, Senegal. So every time I'm in southern Senegal, I go visit her. So like I said, I spent a lot of time in Senegal, and I made this photograph in the north in Saint Louis. It's the former colonial capital of Senegal, and I love the city. This is in a neighborhood called Guet-Ndar, and it's a fishing village, and it comes alive at night, so I'm always there, hanging out with some of my friends, making my photographs. And so this is back in Senegal as well. Every year there's a pilgrimage to Mame Diarra Bousso, who was a female Islamic scholar and a revered saint. And so every year in February, people from around the world actually come to visit her tomb, her mausoleum, and her grave, and they pray to her, they pray for her. This is my friend Sokna Diop. This is also in Senegal. She is a Baifal. Senegal has a huge Sufi community, and one of the things that they're known for is their patchwork garments. So she is a figure in the neighborhood in Saint Louis, and I would like to make a photograph of her because she's always very stylish and wear her patchwork. Here's a picture of Nina Robinson. She's a very good friend of mine. She's an amazing photographer. She's the first black woman photographer to shoot for National Geographic. And this is my favorite photograph of hers. It's in our container. It's also in my book that I published. And I just love it. I always try to show it everywhere I go because I love it. Here's a picture of Fanta Diop. I'm a huge fan of hers. She's the youngest photographer in my book, also the youngest photographer in our container. She's 15 years old. She's amazing. She's a participant in the Bronx Documentary Center's teen program, and this is her grandmother going to a baby shower. I grew up in a Sufi household, so I always like to document Sufi cultures around the world. This is in Cairo, Egypt. Every time I'm in Cairo, I try to see this particular performance in the Old City. It's really beautiful. It's fantastic. The music is some of the chantings from the Quran and different Sufi text. So I'm always very interested in documenting Sufi cultures around the world. So that was it. Thank you. Next up is the person that's next up.
Hello, my name is Shiho Fukada. I'm a photojournalist and that's my son. I'm a photojournalist and filmmaker based in Tokyo. Today, I like to talk about what inspired me to continue to be a photojournalist by showing some of my work. So this is my parents, that's my dad and my mom giving birth to my son. So I came from Japan. It's very homogeneous society and traditional family background. And growing up in such an environment, I felt a strong pressure to be like everybody else and fit in the society. So I took this picture of tea servers in China. They reminded me of pressure at home because of how they uniform, the way they smile and everything. And women in particular in Japan are expected to play a certain role in society. Despite what the Korean Prime Minister says about advancing women's status in society, we still have a long way to go. Whether we like it or not, many women give up their full-time jobs after birth. Women are also economically disadvantaged, especially single mothers in Japan, and they live on the half of national income. And this is Masami I met. She's a single mother of two, 23 years old, while I was working on a child poverty story in Japan. So I also struggle to get back to work after I gave birth to my son. I feel guilty putting my son to daycare, going to work, when all the other mothers in the neighborhood were going to the park with their kids. But I still do this. So, but this, this profession is not legitimate to my family and my father particularly. He still emails me about job postings like, oh, there's a city clerk position at the city hall. So when I was working on a story about temp workers living in an internet cafe because they cannot afford to live in the place, he's like, oh, that could be you. So despite all that, what inspired me to continue is a lot of stories of women I've covered over the years. Women who are oppressed. She's a Latina, she's 13 years old, who was trafficked to a brothel when she was 9 years old in Bangladesh. Women who suffer tremendous loss. This is a family who lost their only child after the school collapse due to earthquake in China in Sichuan province. Women who are living in terrifying conditions. She's a PKK guerrilla fighter hiding out in the mountains of Kurdistan, Iraq. She is ready to die for what she believes in. The women who are survivors of abuse, poverty, war, trafficking, and all the extreme conditions in the world, their courage and strength is what inspires me to keep doing what I do. These women still get up and find a way to persevere, live, and cherish what they have. And it's important for me to tell their stories, continue to tell their stories, and trying to find an audience for it. So, despite all this, if these women can do it, there's no reason that I cannot overcome the little hurdles I face in everyday environments. So it doesn't matter what my father says or what neighborhood people say. So at the Photoville, I'm showing a project about elderly women in Japan who go to prisons for shoplifting. So they express that their voices are not being heard. They express overwhelming loneliness, that nobody cares about their challenges. And I like to end with a picture of women who inspire me most. It's my mother. She she showed me the example of hard work and continues to work hard to this day. So thank you very much. Next up is Courtney.
Oh, wait, no, I'm not ready yet, sorry. So, a quick rundown. I'm not talking about any of my work, I'm talking about specifically a few artists who really inspire me, and how it related to how I ended up working on my photo thesis when I was in school, and the capstone that I was working on, which was about racism and slavery and the effects that it has on building an accurate family tree. And yeah, so the artists that I'll be talking about, I'm kind of just going in chronological order from when I first was introduced to them. And the first person was Ralph Gibson. So in high school, we had to give this presentation, and we had a list of artists to choose from. And his work was really one of the first artists that kind of introduced me to framing and breaking the rules that I guess I'd been taught initially. I just feel like he shows you exactly what you're supposed to be looking at, and it also kind of made me a little stubborn. When I got to college, a lot of professors would tell me that I needed to take a step back, and I didn't listen to them. And I think his work is partially because of that. The next person is Carrie Mae Weems. So in college, I was a photo minor, and really a lot of like the people that we'd been taught about, or that I'd been taught about, were either white women or white men. And Carrie Mae Weems was the first black woman photographer that I was introduced to. She came and spoke at our school, and some like the biggest takeaways that I got from her work was, is it necessary? And it was also the first time that I'd really seen someone do storytelling in a way that I could relate to, or that I could understand. And so this is from the Kitchen Table series, which was really big for me with just like the way that she tells the story and like includes the text in the book. It's like photo and text. And I thought that that was really important for me. The third person is Latoya Ruby Frazier, who came the same week that Carrie Mae Weems did. So I was kind of overwhelmed, but I was actually really dumbstruck when she was giving her presentation. I'd spent a lot of time that year trying to figure out how I could tie together like family work and like a sense of place, and also talking about racism. And so seeing her give her presentation, it really helped me just like have an idea of like what that would look like. I was actually so nervous afterwards. Like I went to get the book signed and I wanted to tell her all this stuff, but I could only say my name. But the book means a lot to me, and also for where I was at the time, I felt that a lot of black people weren't expected to know about like Impressionism. So for this photo specifically, and then also with Carrie Mae Weems with another project she did, it stood out to me that like being able to see women who weren't really supposed to know about them putting themselves in like reference of his work. This is Nydia Blas, who I like absolutely fangirl over every time I get the chance to. She was one of the first black women photographers that I was lucky enough to meet at Syracuse. And while working on my project, I was encouraged to reach out to see if I could like assist her in any way. And she was literally so inspiring. I got to see her like challenge herself and like push herself with work that she was interested in doing. She's amazing, like as an artist and as a person, but she really pushed me to like challenge myself with my work, and honestly got me into doing self-portraiture for the first time, mainly just because of like me watching her, how she does her work. And the last, I fangirl. So the first few images of hers were from a series called The Girls That Spun Gold, and then this photo is from a project called Fire. And the last thing I'm showing, so in July, I'm from South Carolina, but I was raised in New York. So while I was there in July, I ended up going through a bunch of family photos that my aunt had brought out for me. And for like it was just really helpful for me to see like how other members of my family had told stories or like expressed like this sense of community and relationship through their images. So in this one, it's like several generations of my family, my great-grandmother, my aunt, my mom is in the back, and one of my aunts on the side, or one of my great aunts on the side. And yeah, I'm trying to now get back into film, and I think it's partially because of seeing these photos and like trying to recreate some. But it also sort of reminded me, I think, of where my focus on, like focusing on gestures and like small details kind of really came from. And yeah, that's about it. I think this is the last photo. Up next is Smriti.
Thank you so much. And before I start, it's been so inspiring to hear everyone's backstory. It's an honor to be here. And I have to say, check out all of the work. I saw Shiho's work, and I can't stop thinking about it. It's so powerful. But all these backstories are incredible. One thing I'll say is I'm, unlike everyone else who's been on stage, I'm not a photographer, I'm actually a filmmaker. And so my work is in the moving images. And I made a film about nuclear weapons titled The Bomb. It's on Netflix if you ever want to dive deep into a dark subject matter. I spent a lot of time with nuclear weapons, and I had been sitting on these photographs that I photographed nuclear weapons in different silos around the country. So that's sort of what my talk will be about, of how I got to this point. So I grew up in India, Puerto Rico, and the United States, and English is actually my third language. And one of the things that, language is something that I confuse at times, and I have to visualize words. And one of the things that people say a lot in our industry is that I'm really into something. I'm really into a film. I'm really into Stanley Kubrick. I'm really into Sugimoto, or these photographs, or artists like Warhol or LCD Sound System. But you're not really inside of it. It's this one-way, one-directional relationship. Something's always being kind of projected on a screen to you. And I went to see David Byrne last night, and I kept thinking about that. But I thought about, okay, what if you were actually inside of something? And how would the way that you perceive a subject matter change by just changing the way you're seeing it? And I started looking at research into this, and I looked at research coming out of SVA and MIT Media Lab on time perception and memory. And there's this quote that I love that summarizes it all. And it's that monotony collapses time, but novelty expands it. And if you think about your life, or if you think about your childhood, it's why it feels like your childhood went on for so long, or that you remember 2012. That's me as a childhood. It's the best image I could think of. If you think about 2012, you remember it before and after a trip like Peru, or getting married, or your son's graduation. And so as I'm thinking about our memory and how we remember things and how we remember art and things that we perceive, I started reading this book called Command and Control. And this book has left a profound impact with me. It made me feel quite sad and quite angry. Eric's book documents nuclear weapons in this country, and it left me feeling quite angry because I couldn't believe, or sad because I couldn't believe this nuclear reality that we live in a world where there are 15,000 nuclear weapons, enough weapons to destroy this planet 8 times over. But if you destroy a planet once, there's no planet left to destroy 7 more times. So we've just been hoarding these machines. But I was angry because I knew nothing about it. And even though I read the headlines, I just didn't have that same kind of connection to these weapons as a lot of people that were born during the Cold War were alive during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it's because when we think about these weapons, it quickly becomes about the country. It's India, Pakistan, US, Russia, all the countries that have them. But what the book made me realize is that it's really about these machines. And these machines, like microwaves, like computers, these machines will fail. They eventually, we dropped a wrench in a nuclear weapon silo and pierced a warhead and almost had the biggest catastrophe in the United States, in Damascus, Arkansas. And I kept thinking about them as machines, and I thought, there's an image in the book that really always stayed with me, and it was of a nuclear command and control center. And they're quite incredible because they're sort of all around you, and it feels like you have no control. And a lot of diving deep into the subject matter, I realized I wanted to bring people inside and get to experience the machine itself. And I started looking at the seduction of the machine. There's this amazing physicist, her name is Carol Cohn. Both of my parents are quantum mechanics PhD, so science is my entryway into subjects. And she coined this term, the technostrategic metaphor of nuclear weapons. And it looks at all of the masculine language of it. It's thrust to weight ratio, and weapons that are called earth penetrating weapon. And this mine is bigger than yours, which is really what was behind the arms race. And So, I mean, I think if women designed it, at least it wouldn't look this way. So just the tip, which is the name of my container, which is right at the entrance if you go around, is really meant to kind of force people to be face to face with the machine itself. There's a B-6112 nuclear weapon that I've made out of ceramic. There's sounds that are inspired by fallout and radiation data. And it's meant to kind of take these out of sight, out of consciousness from under the ground and into people's sight, so we can at least begin to have a deeper relationship with them. And that's it. Thank you.
What's that? Thank you, Amy Wolff. This is like, I feel like I'm at the Comedy Cellar here with the lights on up and everything. My name's spelled correctly, that's so nice. Some people know who I am. I don't right now because I'm one of the co-founders of Photoville with Sam Barzilay and Laura Romanos, and that's the only reason I'm up here today. This is going to be the longest presentation because language is very difficult after being awake for so long. Let me get situated here. I'll take any questions now before we get started, anything like as I stall for time. And I just wanted to say, Amy, thank you so much for asking me. Remind me not to do this next time when I'm in the middle of doing Photoville so I can think about things. And I want to thank everybody that was up here before. You guys are an inspiration to all of us, and we're so lucky at Photoville to have you here. So thank you very much. And try not to put me on after just the tip next time, okay? Please. Get all the good laughs, the good lines. Oh, I see. It's a short music stand for a short guy. That's funny. That's good. Give me 1 second. All right. Who's pressing play? You ready? Don't go till I say go, man. Don't mess me up here. This is very important to me. And I can't breathe right now, but I'll be fine. Okay. This is not, it's a combination, it's a mishmash, it's a scrapbook of my life. That's what I tried to put together when I had some kind of clear common sense in the last couple of weeks. So, let's go. Where's my headshot? Photo Explorer, Frank Curley. This is a photograph of the ship Endurance on the Shackleton expedition in 1917. At this moment, the ship is trapped in ice. They're probably going to die. What does the photographer do? He goes out on the ice, he sets up flash pods, he takes photos. That's a photographer. And the only reason that this print exists is because he hid it under rocks so that guys wouldn't eat it when they got hungry. Detroit. That's where I'm from. This is a sculpture that was commissioned by Sports Illustrated. It sits at the heart of Detroit at the landing where the city started. It's Joe Louis's fist, and it reminds me where I'm from, how tough and gritty you have to be in Detroit and keep going. This is my man, Steve Prefontaine. He was an All-American runner, a world-class runner, Olympic runner. He was my idol. He encouraged me just by knowing about him to be a runner, which I was successful at. But he also looked as a race as pure guts and courage, but he was the first person I ever heard that said, this race is about art, and I'm going to be the artist that controls the narrative. I remember this. I was really young. This is 1968 Mexico Olympics. Tommy Smith, John Kohlers, Peter Newman from Australia. I think John Dominguez was the photographer. They are protesting against inequality and workers' rights, and what really pisses me off today is that we still have to do this, and we have to continue to do this. Lee Miller. I was in Paris. I saw this photo in a bookstore, and I was like, what is going on here? And then I started reading that's Lee Miller, like probably 1945, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun's bathtub, photographed by David Sherman, Life magazine. She had done about 92 different jobs in her life and became a war photographer, and I hope I can live up and do as many jobs as she can. That's me in the middle, naked, of course, on Broadway with the Wooster Group, and without the Wooster Group, none of this would be possible. Willem Dafoe, Liz Lecomte, the director, Spalding Gray, Kate Falk, Ron Votter, they gave me the opportunity to be out of nowhere to become an artist, which moved me all up into this direction right here. This is my Dark Lord, my friend Matthew Barney, who I've worked with many times. This is a steel pour in Detroit as part of a 9-hour film festival. He is one of the kindest, the most generous people I've ever worked with. He's literally insane. It's the most dangerous stuff I've ever done in my life, and so he inspires me to just keep going bigger all the time. Well, Stephen Hawking, I think you know the guy in the middle. That's me, Dave Shelley, on the side, and that's Lucy, Stephen's daughter. I was his personal production manager in 2010, and what amazed me about the man was what he physically had to go through to stay alive every day. That gives me incredible courage to keep going, and the fact that he had a great sense of humor. Buzz Aldrin, photographed, I believe, by Neil Armstrong, unless there was somebody else in the studio at that time at CBS Fox. I've walked by this photo so many times. I love this photo, and when they say reach for the stars, how can you not reach for the stars? And when I shook this man's hand, I've shaken a lot of people's hands, I just said, wow, he was on the moon. That's incredible. This is Dr. Aim Wilson. In the late 90s, I had a really bad time personally. My mother had a stroke. I had to move home to take care of her in Detroit. I ended up back in my bedroom since age 6. Eventually, I lost everything, my girlfriend, my acting career. My mother passed away. Her brother passed away. My uncle passed away. And then Dr. Aim came in. I thought I had some hope. And then she died on Christmas one day. But that photo makes me to remember the good times and to keep moving forward. This is about hope for me. 1968, Detroit Tigers. The Tigers are down 3-1 in the series. Looks like they're down on the ropes. Throw from Willie Horton to Bill Freehan. Bill Freehan says, no, not in my house. You are out. Tigers go on to win the whole series. It was the turning point. And there's always hope when you think it's over. This is by my friend Ulrika Shimoni in Berlin, her and her partner Andre Rival. She took this photo the day after the wall fell, and it just says, you know what? Photos tell me that I could be that guy. I could be the truck mechanic in Berlin. Well, if you take your hand and you block out the bald dude on the right, you can see the true force and power of Photoville. Without my co-founders, and they will be here a long time after me, since Photoville goes to 2050 and into outer space and on, they are the force and the dreams behind everything. This is a tintype from Penumbra. I encourage you to go over and get one when you get the opportunity. This is the most important photo in my life. This is my partner, Olivia Bramlett. And I look at this every day, and she's my inspiration because as a physical therapist and everything she else does in her life, she works way harder than me. She grinds it out harder and helps people, and I only hope that we have more time together and I can do that for you as well. This is an unknown photo by an unknown possible photographer in an uncharted place, which I believe is my father. My father was born in a small town in Kentucky, coal miner, factory worker in Detroit. My mother grew up in a holler, no plumbing, no electricity, and somehow I got a chance to be in the arts. My dad must have got a camera somewhere in World War II. There's like 3 or 4 photos there left, and it was in a shoebox. I found it, and it just gives me inspiration to keep traveling, to keep moving on, to keep seeing everything. And I don't know if we had that in common, but I think that he was trying to tell me that, is that we have to experience life, and we have to be inspired by all that we meet. And for you, I want that as well, and thank you, my friends, and good night. Next up at the Comedy Palace. So everyone that's here, I encourage you to come up, rush the stage, meet everybody else in the front row, and let's talk about photography and just hang out for a little bit before we have to kick everybody out of the space. And we'll see you over in the beer garden.